Hey there, lovely humans. My name is Kamish Liss, and this is my podcast, Advice from the Inside Out. Have you ever wondered why people continue to commit crimes even after getting out of prison or jail? If corrections deterred people from recommitting crimes, then why is our recidivism rate so high? Within the first 3 years, 2 out of 3 of these individuals are rearrested, and of that, 50% are reincarcerated. By the end of 2020, there were roughly 2 million people locked up in jails and prisons across America. And each year, approximately 600,000 people are released from state and federal prisons. But how successful are we in helping people never come back to jail or prison again? This process of previously convicted people getting rearrested and or re-entering the prison system is called recidivism. And just how do we break these cycles of recidivism? Recent studies have shown that inmates who participate in any educational programs behind bars are 43% less likely to reoffend, and they were far more likely to have employment. In this podcast, we talk to both our formerly incarcerated populations and the incredible people who work with these individuals to ensure that justice is served. It's a solutions-based approach to reimagining the corrections system to help those who get out, stay out. And this is advice from the inside out. Hey there. On this season 1 finale episode, Getting Cut from the Team for Not Making the Grade, How Sports and Dance Can Break the Cycles of Recidivism, we get an incredible opportunity to have a conversation with 2 amazing athletes and positive youth influencers who believe that providing sports and dance programs for justice-engaged youth can help break these cycles of recidivism. Because this episode features 2 guests together, it's a little bit longer than what the other episodes are in Advice from the Inside Out. In addition, I normally feature student work in each one of my episodes, but just for this episode, the format will be a little bit different. Thus, I will not be giving my usual length of context before my podcast conversation. However, I will be highlighting a couple of the important points that support the argument that sports and dance programs are necessary and have the ability to divert or prevent further criminal behavior. Jen Schumann, founder and lead trainer at Performance Game Plan, as well as a hip-hop dancer and teacher, is one of the guests featured in this episode. She has received multiple degrees with sports management and sports psychology, and she's taught dance as part of her master's thesis fieldwork to incarcerated youth. Our other guest on this episode is Randy Sims, who's a senior business strategist at Yahoo and also a former NCAA Division I college football player at the University of Arizona. In our conversation, we cover a number of different topics relevant to understanding how sports and dance programs can impact future criminal behavior in positive ways. Both Jen and Randy provide unique and powerful life perspectives on how to help students reset on healthy life trajectories. But it isn't just their life experiences that back up the argument that sports and dance programs can positively change recidivism rates. In November of 2021, the Journal of Quantitative Criminology published an article specifically looking at the effectiveness of sports programs on future criminal behavior. The article is entitled, "Do Sports Programs Prevent Crime and Reduce Reoffending? A Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis on the Effectiveness of Sports Programs." Now, you can look at this article in detail as the link has been provided in the description of this podcast. However, there are a couple of important takeaways as a result of this study. In their objectives, researchers pointed out that while sports programs are widely used as a way to prevent crime, there is not a whole lot of systematic knowledge about the effectiveness of these programs. This gap is where the researchers were able to gain some actual data and results that supported their objectives. The results found that there was a significant decrease in areas such as aggressiveness or antisocial behavior. They also found that the psychological outcomes, such as self-esteem or mental well-being, were significantly improved when those individuals had participated in sports programs. There are a lot of studies that are out there that are currently in progress to help us determine the effectiveness of sports and dance programs towards breaking the cycles of recidivism. I've linked these studies and articles in the description section of this podcast episode as well. But do these psychological outcomes actually deter illegal or criminal behavior? And while the research is still out, the signs are pointing to yes. I hope you enjoy this amazing conversation and learn new perspectives on just how transformative sports and dance programs, combined with coaches as positive youth influencers, can be in a young person's life. This is advice from the inside out. So I'm super excited to have Jen Schumann and Randy Sims here today as our amazing guests. We're going to be talking about and focusing on different approaches through sports, physical activity, and mental learning and capability are able to help our juvenile justice youth be able to not recidivate. So I welcome you both to the show. And Jen, I want to start off with you. So, Jen, tell me a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about where you grew up, what some of your hobbies are. And really, I want to hear a little bit about your career path and how did you start to come across the juveniles that you have worked with in the past?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on here. And thank you for hosting a podcast like this. I think this is incredibly necessary. The groups that I've worked with in the past have been predominantly high school aged teenagers, as well as what I consider a transitional age group, which is at 18 to 22-year-old group where you are technically an adult, but like, are you really an adult? And when I was getting my master's degree in sport management, I wrote my thesis while working in the San Francisco Youth Guidance Center, and brought in a dance program into the women's unit as a way to work with the young women who were incarcerated at the time, to help get through their days. And we actually did a combination between dance and basketball, as some of the kids were really not into dance and others were way more into sports like basketball. And those who had absolutely no interest, we would get involved in other ways, whether it was reffing, keeping score, or helping me keep track of counts when it came to dance and with the music, as well as helping me pick out songs. From there, I decided that I didn't have enough education in the psychological aspect of the group I was working with. So I went back to school and got another master's degree in sports psychology, where I spent my internship hours working at the Orrin Allen Youth Rehabilitation Facility, which is located in Byron, California, and eventually actually went on to supervise interns at that program once I graduated.
And I think that I would love for you to mention where you're from. Although I think that our listeners now just heard you say San Francisco. So, and that's cheating because now I just called you out as San Francisco. But yes, can you just let us know? So you grew up in San Francisco, California.
Yes, I grew up in San Francisco, California. I moved to Tucson, Arizona, where I went to the University of Arizona for undergrad, where I was a dancer, a competitive dancer. And then I decided to move back to San Francisco for my master's degrees.
A couple of things that I want to ask you about. A lot of times when we come into contact with students that express some level of trauma or complex trauma, we get affected by the kids that we work with. And we get affected by the students that we're trying to teach. And so I was wondering if you might be able to talk about or give any sort of like experiences of any students or people that you've come across that have changed your perspective on some of the criminal justice reform or the recidivism piece or any of those types of experiences.
But one of the students who I was working with in San Francisco at the San Francisco Youth Guidance Center, she was very open about why she was inside. And these records are totally sealed. If I were to Google it, I wouldn't No. It was for truancy and it was for running away from home. It was not for something that I believed to be criminal activity. She greatly impacted me because some of her situations were really just that of teenage angst, of leaving home, of leaving the classroom. And in my time working as an athletic director in the city, how many kids I saw just get up and leave, but it could have put them into jail. And that's really what happened with this young woman. And I found that one to be very impactful because I grew up with a tremendous amount of privilege and my knowledge in dance is specifically in hip hop dance. And it has taken a long time to get to an understanding of the appreciation versus appropriation. And this young woman definitely put into perspective a lot of the privilege that I had in just learning about it versus experiencing it. What was considered her crimes were things like running away and her parents calling the police because they were worried, or for not showing up to school for however many days in a row. And it felt very unfair, but I didn't say that out loud. I couldn't. It would cross a line. So I never said that, but it definitely impacted me.
So, Jen, I understand that sometimes it's difficult. I know that different schools feel different ways about teaching history on hip hop culture. I know you've had quite a bit of experience at working at multiple schools, and also have had different experiences with whether or not the topic was truly welcomed into the curriculum. And I was just wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I also want to clarify that when I speak on hip hop, I am talking about hip hop as a dance form. I don't know much about hip hop as a culture outside of the dance form, other than how the music pertains to the movement. And I've worked at quite a few schools, and the vast majority have been very open to the fact that I have insisted on speaking on how this is appreciating culture and not appropriating it. And I had an experience at one school where I didn't stay very long there because of this. But one of the examples I had brought up, the class was predominantly white. This was back when Obama was president, and he had brought the artist Common to some event that he had done. And people were criticizing the fact that Common, who is a rapper, was in the White House. And the term that was used by a lot of white people, not necessarily in the classroom, but in general as a criticism to Obama, was, why are you inviting a quote unquote thug into the White House? Now, I don't know how much of Common's music you listen to, but this man is a poet. And when I brought this up and talked to this particular class about it, the principal of the school came literally running down the hall to shut me up and told me that I was not allowed to talk about these things. I ended up quitting the next day.
I know that you are somebody who is a woman of your convictions on this. And I think that to me, it surprised me when you had that experience. It was very surprising to me. And yet it was like a stark moment of reality where it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually walk the walk and do it. Now, let me ask you this, Jen. So you've worked with a lot of students now, and many of them have been incarcerated or had justice entanglement. And I'm wondering if you might be able to talk specifically about perhaps the role of, let's say, like dance, for example, in helping students overcome some of their juvenile justice barriers. And perhaps you have thoughts on how dance can be utilized in a way that allows a reduction in the cycles of recidivism.
I wrote my graduate thesis on the use of sports and dance as an adjunct to rehabilitation for incarcerated youth. The title was much longer than that, but we won't go into all of that. Part of it is just getting through the day. And I was in a very niche group where I don't know if my strategies would work with teenagers and kids who did not have that propensity towards sports or athletics or moving their bodies. There is an active form of therapy called dance therapy that is used to help heal trauma. And I went into this, but did it in a more fun, choreographed way to take up time while they were inside, which helped to alleviate boredom. It also generated a lot of confidence, which was something that was taken away when they were locked up in the first place. There is a significant amount of depression and feelings of lack of self-worth. And sometimes having those moments of laughing and dancing, as well as creating. It might have been some of my choreography, but I absolutely included and encouraged their own freedom of movement and expression with what's going to make them feel the best if they leaned towards this type of activity.
Do you think that this type of programming works?
I can only speak to kids, juveniles, or even including the transitional age group. If someone is into it, then yes, it absolutely works. 100%. And I think that it crosses the line into other sports too. If there is a propensity towards a specific sport for kids, teenagers, the use of whatever that is, whether it's dance, basketball, volleyball, whatever, maybe it's chess, maybe it's art. I know we're talking sports right now, but whatever that is going to absolutely help. Now, there is a particular line that I will not cross when it comes to clinical psychology. I am not a psychiatrist, and there are certain circumstances in which this will not work. I am talking about for those kids and teenagers who are incarcerated for reasons that are not because of an existing mental condition that needed an extreme amount of psychiatric intervention.
Well, I actually just really appreciate you talking specifically just now about, whether or not sports is something that, piques somebody's interest. As many of my listeners know, most of my guests, when I talk to my guests, some of them are avid sports players and some of them played sports in college. And they all have talked about the importance of sports in their lives, and in particular, the importance of sports in keeping them on towing the line that they needed to walk when they were in high school. So it actually gives me an opportunity to open this up and introduce our next guest on the podcast, Randy Sims. Now, I met Randy many years ago. Randy played at University of Arizona. I was just thrilled to meet him and to get to know him. I've known him for many, many years, and his path to where he is now and the different obstacles he's overcome, but also the achievements that he's had are really remarkable. And so I'm super excited to talk to you also today, Randy. And I'm also going to invite Jen to participate in some of the questions that we have for you today, because Jen has also known you for a very long time. So welcome to the podcast, Randy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with both of you, and to join this important conversation. Lisa, thank you. Jen, thank you. So I'm excited. I'm excited to dive in.
Good. Well, so why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up and just some of the different types of experiences you had. How did you become a Division I college football player? And you obviously have had many different experiences in your path. So I want to have our listeners get to know your pathway a little bit. So where are you from, Randy? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm from San Francisco, California. Some people call it the city. Some people call it Frisco, the SCO. I don't call it the city. I call it San Francisco, California, Frisco. Visitation Valley. And yeah, I call myself, my brother and I, we were some of the fortunate ones, not just in our neighborhood, but just in our network of friends, because one, we had two parents in the household. And within the household, we had a support group. We had a support group, not only with our parents, but with older relatives, whether it be uncles and aunts, cousins. The saying, it takes a village, right? And it really does take a village, because there's a lot of obstacles, there's a lot of hurdles, there's a lot of things that can definitely, there's decisions that I've came across at a young age where, those decisions that I had to make on my own. It was all thankful to my parents and to those that were in my life as mentors, as counselors, as folks that I could just talk to, that were just steering me in the right direction. I didn't know it at that time, but it was a direction that, it was kind of foggy. No, no pun intended, because being from San Francisco is so foggy.
That was awesome. That was absolutely awesome. I loved it.
It was kind of foggy because, again, you're a kid and you're listening and absorbing. But at the same time, you also want to come into your own of, I want to make my own decisions. And growing up where I grew up, there was also the notion of like, you can't be a punk. You can't let people disrespect you. You can't let people run over you, because that was a clear case of being what they call a mark or a buster. And then people always try to test you, and people always try to take advantage of you. And you did not want that to happen. So it was, it was these battles internally that you have to deal with growing up in the city, as a Black child, as a Black kid. And then on top of that, wanting to just have fun and enjoy your childhood and be free. But my freedom was always correlated to sports. My parents put my brother and I in sports as early as I can remember, and we were involved in everything. I played for the San Francisco Seahawks, Kimball Field, and the Mo. Before I played for the Seahawks, I actually swam on the San Francisco Park and Rec swim team. It was all Black. It was actually not all Black. It was majority African American or majority Black American swim team with a sprinkle of some other ethnic groups and whatnot. And we would always travel to like Northern California, like Sebastopol and north of there. And we're always competing against all white swim teams. And it was one of those, it was one of those things where you walked into the pool and everyone stopped because they never saw an all Black or a multicultural swim team. And we used to kick ass too. So it was really cool to be involved in that. But, at the end of the day, these were my outlets. And this is how I was able to foster strong relationships, strong friendships, amazing mentors, through coaches and through friends, friends' fathers or friends' uncles or grandfathers that used to come watch the games that either played in their days or, would give me advice or give us advice so we can be better. It was always the opportunity to be better. It was always the opportunity to, what you put in is what you get out. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, you live in a big city like San Francisco, there's a lot of temptations. There's a lot of peer pressure. There's a lot of opportunities to, go left instead of going right. Not right in direction, but right in life. And so with those temptations and with those opportunities, you kind of have to, in a sense, block it. And you run the risk of being called a punk by your friends, or you run the risk of losing friends because they feel like you're not aligned with them. They feel like you're not down for them. Oh, you're not going to ride with us? Are you're not going to pull this lip with us? So at the end of the day, being called a square was, during that time, I hated it. It has afforded me opportunities to be where I'm at today. And I think sports has given me so many opportunities that I would never have had in my life, because it was always about focusing on, okay, well, I'm playing Pop Warner football. Now, I want to play high school football. Okay. I made, freshman team. Now I want to make the varsity team.
Where'd you go to high school, Randy?
I went to Archbishop Riordan High School.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to Archbishop Riordan High School. It was, people know, class of 01, we had a squad. We had tremendous amount of athletes, student athletes. Let's be very clear, student athletes, because we couldn't step on the field if we didn't have the grades. And we had coaches, we had structure that kept us in line. It was one of those things where it was, going to a Catholic high school in San Francisco and playing a lot of the more affluent and wealthier Catholic high schools in the Bay Area, in the peninsula, from St. Ignatius and Sacred Heart in the city, all the way down to San Jose, playing, Midi and Bellarmine and so on and so forth. I had friends that played in the AAA. There was definitely a difference. These are amazing athletes. These were, to stress the mental toughness. When it's 100 degrees and it's the fourth quarter and you're dead tired and you're down by 3, they're tired. Your opponent's tired too. How are you going to get past that heat? How are you going to get past that fatigue? It's mental toughness. When you are in a situation as a grown adult and you may be working and you have numerous amount of projects piled up and you have to stay up all night. There's really no opportunity to quit, right? It's all about the mental toughness. How are you going to strategize? How are you going to prioritize? And how are you going to execute the plan? All of that is from sports.
And has that like helped you out today too, right?
Oh my God, tremendously. I use sports in so many different facets of my life. When I graduated from the University of Arizona, my career, ultimately stopped after college. I was hurt. I'll be totally honest. I was hurt because I love sports, but I love football, and I have so much passion for the sport. And of course, I wanted to take it to the league, and that just wasn't in my deck of cards. What football did teach me, and what football has taught me, and what I try to share with anyone that will listen, is the discipline, is the work ethic, it's the teamwork, the collaboration, is the mental toughness. It's those times where you think you can't run that extra gasser or you can't run that extra 100-yard sprint, but you take it to the next level and you keep pushing yourself and you keep pushing yourself past that limit that you have in your mind. And that's what I think at the end of the day, why sports is so important, especially for young kids, because sports brings people together from so many different backgrounds, from so many different walks of life. It breaks down language barriers. It breaks down gang barriers. It breaks down the notion that I don't like you because of you're from this neighborhood or you from this block, or I don't like you because you're from this neighborhood, from this block. I played before Arizona, so my whole path from after after Reardon, I scholarshiped to Villanova University, and I actually came back and I played at San Francisco City College. That was probably one of the best experiences I had, playing in front of my hometown with some amazing athletes from around the country. And on top of that, making and building meaningful relationships with men that were giving their all every day at practice, giving their all every day in the game, because they wanted to prove to that scout, I'm worthy of that scholarship. It's not that I'm worthy, not only that I'm worthy of the scholarship, but I need this scholarship. I need this scholarship because this scholarship is going to change my life. So, you're around that type of, when you're around that type of environment, there is no excuse for quitting. There is no excuse for getting down on yourself. There's no excuse for not pushing yourself, because at the end of the day, nothing in this world is going to be given to you. And everyone's situation is different. Everyone has, not everyone has two parents in the home. Not everyone has a support system like my brother and I did. Not everyone has an opportunity to be involved in, organizations like the Omega Boys and Girls Club. Not everyone has coaches and mentors and individuals that are looking at you as like, you know what, I'm going to help you out because there's just something about you. I just want to help you out. There's a lot of kids out here that get shunned. There's a lot of kids that they get written off so quickly for no reason, both men and women, young girls and young boys. But those are the ones that I feel like if you just introduce them to something within sports, and it doesn't have to be football, it doesn't have to be basketball. It could be football, what we call football in America, but it could be football, what the rest of the world calls. It could be, now we're looking at it, now sports has evolved so much, esports, right? Video games. That could tap into a young kid's creativity. That can tap into a young kid's desire to build something, to create something from scratch. It's just scratching the surface in terms of like what we are defining as sports, right? Because at the end of the day, sports is not a physical thing, and right? Yeah, you think about boxing, you think about football, and even basketball. Obviously you have to have the physical attributes to compete, but it's a must that you have that mental toughness. It's a must you have that aptitude to compete and to win over your opponent.
even though I'm glad this is a podcast, because I think that while you were speaking, I got all emotional. I think I got the chills at some point and some of this stuff I really, didn't know about you, Randy. And so it's really been enlightening. Two things. And then I'm going to ask Jen if she might lead some aspects of our conversation together with you. I have students who started off in sports, loved it, adored it, and were good at it, like actually had pathways to move forward. And then obviously for an assortment of different reasons, there was like the one kid who happened to be like one of my students, right? The one kid who ended up not making the grades, getting thrown off the team. They're then not having things to do after school, starts to not come to school, no longer really is engaged because they're no longer playing on the team because they didn't have the support for the GPA that they needed to play. And I see the downward spiral that causes. I'm just wondering, do you know those types of situations? Have you seen those happen before where, all of a sudden, because of additional support, somebody's sports pathway is literally revoked from them?
Just listening to you, I thought about a couple people that I know personally, amazing athletes, amazing people, first of all. Sorry, I'm getting a little choked up. And so these individuals, I'm not a teacher, I'm not a guidance counselor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not anything of that nature. But it begs the question, right? Did these individuals have some type of learning disability? These adults that were trained to help them did not catch? Or was it also, again, going back to what I said before, the lack of mental toughness? There's been times where, I've had to pull an all-nighter. And I'm not talking about in college, I mean in high school. There's times where I only had 3 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep. But I knew what the end result would be if I did not finish this assignment or write this paper. These particular individuals that I'm thinking of, some of the best athletes that I've ever played against, some of the best athletes that I've ever came across, some didn't make it to college, to the D1 level. They for sure didn't make it to the league. And then, you start to ask why. I took my academics very seriously. Could I have helped him? Could I have sat him down like, okay, let's go through this together? I'm not saying I put that pressure on my shoulders, but it's also like, man, like he should have been here with me. He should have been at Arizona with me. I should be playing against him at another D1 college. I tell a lot of youngsters, I break it down to them in the simplest form. When you're talking about sports, and when you're especially talking about sports that's generating revenue, within the NCAA, it's all about numbers. So an average scholarship is $300,000 to $400,000, and you have 50 kids. If you have 50 kids on the high school team, you multiply that by your whole league, multiply that by the state, multiply that by the country, right? So obviously, each college only has a certain amount of scholarships that they can allocate to a student. So therefore, these coaches, obviously, they want to make an investment that they're going to see a return on. That return is going to be, okay, this individual is going to produce on the field. This individual is not going to give me any trouble in the community. This individual is going to be a stellar student, and I don't have to worry about him. When I talk to young kids, they might have 2 out of 3. They might have 1 out of 3, but you need 3 out of 3. And these are things that were told to me at a young age. And so my whole focus was like, okay, I need to be a stellar student. So I need to, take my academics seriously, not only just to stay on the field, but to also put myself in the best position to earn a scholarship. I need to produce on the field so these coaches know that I can play at that level. But most importantly, I don't need to get in trouble because that's going to jeopardize my future. Because a lot of my friends that I know that were amazing athletes and they went to school, but maybe they just had trouble. And then you start down that spiral. And it's unfortunate because now, they're looking for that replacement, that team camaraderie replacement. You're on the team, you're in the locker room, you're on the bus, you're going to the game, you play the game, you travel from the game. There's nothing like that. And I'm talking about from the aspect of football, but I can say this for basketball, I can say this for track, I can say this for any team sport. There is nothing like that 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 family, that brotherhood that you have from sport. And when you don't live up to that agreed, GPA, you try to find something to replace that feeling.
Everything you're saying is is just so legit. And, many of my listeners, I always love saying, I played college basketball at UC Santa Cruz. We're the Banana Slugs. So, but when I think about a Division 1 school like University of Arizona, but even in a division, whatever we were school, that camaraderie that you're talking about, that physical discipline that you're talking about. But one of the things that I thought you just said that was perspective changing and, really amazing is that when kids are thrown off of those teams for needing additional supports that other actual systems are failing them on, when those students are trying to figure things out and they're searching for the same feeling, but now they're searching for them in different places, and there are plenty of other places that will give fake feelings of family.
And it's one of those things where, even like in between seasons, because I remember, in high school, I think it's my junior year, football season ended. I didn't play basketball. So I had time before track started. And it was so weird to not go to practice or not be involved in a team sport, to the point where I didn't even know what to do with myself. And I was doing stupid shit, like going to Stonestown and going to Mercy High School. And I'm like, what am
I was going to say something about Mercy High School, by the way, because I know Reardon and Mercy, when I was teaching at Mercy, and all the Reardon boys, and Mercy's an all-girls school, so all the Reardon boys would come. It was a close enough school where they'd come and sit down and hang out and then take their dates to Stonestown. So that's awesome. You and Jen have known each other for a really long time. You both were at University of Arizona. Jen has quite the experience in broadcast radio. Both of you were from San Francisco, and both of you went to Tucson, Arizona.
When Jen and I connected, this is how crazy this world is. And this is how small San Francisco is. First question, if you're from the city, you're from Frisco, first question, are you from the Bay? Let me just be real. If you're from the Bay and you meet anyone outside of California, anyone in the world, you meet someone from the Bay, anyone from San Francisco in the world, the first thing you're going to ask them, what high school did you go to?
That's what I asked you, because I know when I said, Randy, what high school did you go to? Because I know all my listeners, especially if they're in the Bay, are going to be like, well, what high school did he go to?
Exactly. And it's not like, I went to, like, no, what high school did you go to? And so Jen was like, I went to Urban. I was like, okay, yeah, Haight Street. Okay, I know, yeah. I did an AIM High program during the summer at Urban, beautiful campus. And one of my classmates at Reardon, his twin sister went to Urban. So I don't know if I should mention her name or not, but I'll just leave her name out of it. So I was like, oh, do you know this person? She's like, oh my God, I do. And I think, Lissa, were you in her sister's class?
Yes, Lissa knows her sister.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Ooh, I don't know.
You do.
Okay, I do.
You did.
I did, Randy. I did.
Yes. So immediately I was just like, oh no, we locked in. Like, so-and-so. And I basically grew up with that family. I feel like I was lucky in the sense that not only did I get to meet Jen, but I got to meet, Jen's friends, which included one of my teammates, one of her brothers, one of my brothers. And, it just kind of blossomed from there. And as I really started to, get my bearings in regards to Tucson, I didn't have a car when I first arrived. So I was at the mercy of other friends who had cars. And, basically it was either I was at home or I was at the facility or I was at class. And then you obviously mix in some parties, bars, and all that stuff, normal college stuff. But I didn't really get to venture outside of this kind of make-believe bubble. So in my eyes, the culture for me was surrounding sports, because I was hanging out with football players, volleyball players, softball players, soccer players. And we weren't looking at each other as, oh, you're Black, you're white, you're Latinx, you're Asian. We were looking at like, okay, what sport do you play? Oh, dope, cool. I'm gonna come check you out. We have folks that were from big cities. You have folks that are from different states. You have folks that were places I've never even heard of in the United States. But at the end of the day, it was the common denominator was sports. And Jen, you know, she was so influential in my experience at Arizona because, all right, listen, I'm gonna be honest. I was kind of a wild dude at Arizona.
Yeah, I want you to tell us, Brandon, tell us.
I had no. I was just sorry for all the noise in the background. New York City is a very loud city. I was a wild dude at Arizona. I worked my butt off to get there. I worked my butt off to earn a scholarship. I earned 2 scholarships. One scholarship to Villanova, and then I bounced back to City, like I mentioned before, and I earned my scholarship to Arizona. And the reason I picked Arizona, not only because of the tradition and everything that went with that, but also because it was the Pac-10. It was the Pac-10 at the time, not the Pac-12. It was the Pac-10, and my dad was sick. And I knew this would be the best opportunity for him to see me play, whether it be at Cal, Stanford, or, possibly him, not taking a cross-country trip, but him taking a shorter, having a shorter distance to come see me play. I didn't tell anyone about this because it was obviously something very personal. It's still very personal. But, with all of that, dealing with all that on the kind of in the background, it was just really amazing to have friends that, despite all of the stuff that I was dealing with and how I released that anger or released that maybe depression, maybe anxiety, at that time, we didn't talk about that type of stuff. At that time, it wasn't, this big thing of really focusing on mental health. It was like, no, you got to deal with it, especially in the Black community. Didn't talk about this at all. It was toughen up, deal with it, mental toughness. Same breath, that mental toughness can be so detrimental to you, especially when you have a lot of shit on your shoulders. I leaned on alcohol a lot as my crutch. It definitely was something where, obviously I'm of age. Let's make that clear. I was of age, okay? But leaning on alcohol because I didn't know how to verbally communicate what I was feeling or what I was thinking or what I was going through. Football allowed me to have that outlet. It allowed me to go out there and bust people's heads. It allowed me to go out there and hit people. And I was being applauded for it. It allowed me to go out there and just not think about my family back home, my father, my brother and how he's dealing with everything. But when you leave the field and you're not in the classroom or you're not, and they had us on a very strict schedule. I drink. And obviously it's college. Everyone's going to drink. But as an athlete and as a high performing athlete, alcohol is the worst thing that you can put in your body. And I was doing it. And I love Jen and I love all my friends from the U of A because not even knowing that they were doing it, but they were supporting me because they didn't know what I was going through because I didn't know how to share it, but they were supporting me. Until this day, Jen has always been in my corner. I'm always going to be in her corner. I'm always going to be in her family's corner. I'm always, these are the people that that I value because it goes without saying, like that loyalty is so rare, and going through so many different trials and tribulations, not in terms of like dealing with personal issues, to have someone in your corner that's like, I don't care, you're my brother, I got you. That means a lot. So yeah.
I know that your friendship is based on unconditional love. We've had people on the podcast talk about how so many of our students that are in the juvenile justice system or the adults system, that they really lacked somebody giving them the unconditional love in healthy ways. And so perhaps one thing that we might be able to say, just based on this conversation that we're having right now, is that close friends that you can truly be yourself with actually have the opportunity to thwart a friend off of the path of juvenile justice or making some very bad decisions in their lives. And perhaps having great friendships and support systems are one way to divert recidivism, to establish healthy relationships like that.
I agree, but we also have to look at how do we define friendships or great friendships? Because, for me, I was fortunate and super grateful enough to be introduced to Jen. One or two decisions that I could have made in my life, it could have altered my introduction to Jen. It could have altered my introduction to. It could have altered my whole life. So at the end of the day, like we talk about a system, right? Yeah, the system's fucked up, but it's also it comes down to one or two decisions. It comes down to, oh shit, like I tried to pull this lick, which was almost 3 to 5 minutes, maybe even less than that, but it cost me 5 to 8 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Or I try to come up on something hella quick, but it costed me probation, or it cost me, lawyer fees, or it cost me my family coming to court and the emotional stress that I have to put on them.
So Randy and Jen, I'm going to ask you both to reflect on this, because Randy, you just brought it up, but I think it's a great question for you both. Knowing that there are, like you were talking about, these one or two decisions, right? Those decisions and all the different things you were just saying, Randy. What might you say if you ran into a young person the day before they make their terrible mistakes?
So, Lisa, to answer your question, I don't know how to answer that question. To be completely honest, I don't think it's one thing I would say. I think I would just try to have a conversation with that young man. I think I would try to have a conversation, sit down with him, and just talk about life. Talk about what is going on in his life, what is going on in his mind. Because there's something deeply rooted of why he made that decision to go along with what they end up doing, and obviously the consequences that were ultimately detrimental. So just to be an ear, to be a source that they can share, if they feel comfortable, what is going on. And it's not going to be something that's going to, happen overnight, and the reason I say this is because I was lucky to have individuals like that would, hey man, let's take a walk. Hey man, your mom tells me you're acting up. What's going on? Hey man, your dad tells me, you lashing out. What's happening? Because at the end of the day, if I didn't have that opportunity to release, have the opportunity to talk to someone that was not my parents or not someone that was trying to be super strict or trying to scold me, but I could just talk to, whether it be my next door neighbor, an older cousin, or just someone that was around the way that just knew me, I could have been influenced. I could have been peer pressure. I don't think there's one thing I could say. I think I would just try to be a vessel of just someone that is willing to listen and just absorb what they're feeling and what they're going through, and just try to be a support system. And
Totally.
hopefully that will propel this individual to go home or to do something different, so he or she can see the next day. It takes a village. It's an African proverb, right? It takes a village, meaning everyone has to have their hands in to raise a young man, a young woman, a young black man, a young black woman, a young Latin man, young Latin woman. It takes a village, because from the day of your birth, this shit is built against us. Everything, every aspect of life, whether it be educational, health, criminal justice, economics, everything is built against us. So I used to be a part of this organization called the Mega Boys. I'm still a part of this organization. Let me stop. I'm an alumni. Mega Boys and Girls Club, based out of San Francisco. Shout out Dr. Marshall. Shout out Jack, RP coach, Miss Norris. Their motto was, the more you know, the more you owe. Meaning, if you got the game, if you know things, don't hold that, share it. Because there's going to be young individuals that are going to need this when they're coming when they're coming up. And that could be the difference between them being incarcerated and them going off to college. That could be the difference of them, doing something that they're going to regret for the rest of their lives, and them making their family proud, breaking down barriers, breaking down the cycle, showing their loved ones, showing folks from their neighborhood, like, yo, I did it, so can you. And we talking about sports, but I'm just talking about life now. It's the more you know, the more you owe. And I've always said that to anyone that will listen. You've come this far for a reason, because people have helped you, people have supported you. I've come this far because people have helped me, people have supported me, people have pushed me in directions like, I'm like, wait, what's going on? Like, nah, you go that way. Don't come over here. You go that way. Or no, you go home. You're not staying on this corner. You go home. So at the end of the day, it takes a village.
Randy, I'm stealing this, by the way, the more you know, the more you owe. And I wanted to just remind you, and Lissa, I will be sure to send you the photos that I have. But Randy came in when I was at the high school where I was working as an athletic director and advisor. And I taught an elective to juniors and seniors only. And it was an intro to sport business class. And I would try and bring in guest speakers all the time. And I brought in Randy. To this day, these kids who are now grown, some of them have graduated from college. It's always these kids who talk about, they remember you in the classroom. And you were talking about NCAA versus NFL. You were talking not even so much about anything that had to deal with sports psychology aspects, but just with sports and sport business.
How important is it? Like, these are the crucial moments, right? So what do you wish you had had at that age to help you make good decisions, And it sounds like
my decisions were not easy, but like for me, it was like, okay, when I enrolled in Riordan, I remember I told my mom and my dad, I'm like, all right, I'm dedicating 4 years so you guys don't have to pay for my college. They looked at me, my mom was like, don't worry about that. I'm like, no, y'all sacrificed so much for me. Y'all sacrificed so much for my brother and I. I'm dedicating 4 years so you guys don't have to pay for my college. Meaning, like, I was just going to focus on getting a scholarship, getting an athletic scholarship. So I guess for me, I don't know if there was anything that could have been, for me, if there was anything differently that, someone would have told me, right? I think at the end of the day, it's the experiences. I wouldn't want anything to go differently, because I wouldn't be the man I am today. I wouldn't be here right now, if that makes sense.
it does make sense. And that's pretty much what, many of my students actually say that exact thing. So, because had they not, for some of my students who have addiction problems, had they not gone to jail where they actually did receive some level of help there for it, they would not have been able to stop. And some of them, more often than not, they recidivate in addiction. But when they go to jail, they talk about how that's like a place to have clean time. So it's really interesting.
It's really interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think coaches also play a huge role. And I've talked to my parents a lot about this lately, where I'm like, there's been stuff that's come up in the city and outside of the city, and stuff that we're seeing even with the gymnasts who are speaking to the Senate. I talked to my parents and I'm like, how did I get so, like, I never experienced any of that. Like, you got really lucky with coaches, except my basketball coach my senior year was kind of a jerk, but Lissa, no response.
How do you want me to respond to that? You should probably then let our listeners know who your coach was.
My coach was possibly the person hosting this podcast. She was one of two. She was the jerk. No,
Oh my goodness.
No, but
I gotta hear this story. I gotta hear this.
There is no story. There's no story, Randy.
There's no story. Lissa was my coach, and I had another coach who was great as well. And I was just making fun of Lissa because it was easy to do. But having really good coaches and having good people and what that means, what good means, I don't know how to define. And I've had some great coaches who pulled some stuff. And when I say that I've worked with as an athletic director, who've pulled some stuff where it made it so they could not coach. But man, the stuff that they did that made it so they could not coach anymore was certainly not because the kids didn't, or that anything happened towards these kids. And so losing some of those coaches definitely affected the kids. And whether it's education, and I know in this particular podcast, we're talking about sports, so I'll keep it to sports education. Coaching is so important. And for parents to really pay close attention who your coaches are, because these are the people who influence these kids. And Randy, real talk, I've told you before, in the job I'm in now, while prospecting over at City College, I have met some of your coaches from City. And the second that I say that Randy Sims is my brother, all conversations opened up, because every single one of them remembers you. And I know you remember them from the conversations that I then had with you afterwards. And whatever a coach is defined by, and Lisa, you are a great coach. It's just easy for me. I'm just poking fun at you right now, but it's part of the teaching aspect. It's the sport education, and coaches remember athletes, and athletes certainly remember their coaches. And I had great coaches and great athletic directors. And I think that helped me to help others as much as I could, aside from this one situation that really is a difficult one to talk about.
Shout out City College of San Francisco. Football team 6-0. Man, you hit it right on the head, Jen. Like, I think, and I don't have any statistics, but just thinking back to my playing days, I spent more time with my coaches and my teammates than I did with my parents. I mean, when you think about it, like,
Yeah, that's a seriously good point, especially when you go through sweet misery with these people.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, like, my coach at Reardon was one of my teachers. And then turn around, we're on the field 2 hours, 2.5 hours in the afternoon. Then on the weekends, we have a game, off season, summer practice, right? Like, this is my coach. When I went to City, same thing. I'm with these individuals more than I'm with my family. That influence, that impact is invaluable, which also begs to, question, like, how are we evaluating these individuals that hold these coaching titles?
Okay, so what I'd like to do is thank you both so much for choosing to be on a podcast like this. I know that your time is so valuable, and for you to be able to spend an hour or so with me on this podcast talking about these and being, like you said, Randy, just being completely genuine, completely authentic, and completely for real. That's why this podcast is the way it is because we need to hear the real. We have to, or we're not going to be able to start the path that it needs to take to overcome what's been going on. What I do want to say is that I wanted to thank you both because you guys both, you two, both represent the change that we wish to see in the world around us. And you oftentimes on our podcast, we identify all the problems that people have. We identify all the problems that trip up people in the criminal justice system and in recidivism. What we don't talk about enough is the success stories where that didn't happen. And today I feel like on this podcast that is what in fact was expressed, that it was a opportunity to hear from people who positively influence change and who are that change, who are able to be that change that we wish to see. So basically, this show today has been about success rather than identifying all the problems. Obviously, we identified a lot of problems, but overall, the fact is that success and continuing success, which we hope and we want, will continue to happen for us. So thank you so much both for being on the show today. Okay there, lovely humans. This is the part of the show where I give credit and shouts out to all the people and the organizations that make my podcast possible. Shout out to Jen Schuman and Randy Sims for being the change we all wish to see in the world and for providing the best opportunities for our justice-engaged youth to reach their highest potentials. If you are interested in finding out more about what Jen Schuman does, you can visit her website at www.performancegameplan.com. As this is the final episode in Season 1 of Advice from the Inside Out, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all of my guests for choosing to sit down and have conversations with me and to think about the many different ways to help our incarcerated populations never come back to jail or prison again. You can find a comprehensive list of all the resources that I used in this episode in the episode description. This has truly been an amazing experience and one that I look forward to continuing in Season 2. Signing off for now, this is Kamish Liss. Thank you for joining me on Advice from the Inside Out.